Probably the best investment I ever made in my kitchen was making sure I have a really good stand mixer with a mincing attachment. It is so important, not just for making your meatballs and your spaghetti bolognese. No. For me, I like to make a classic, and this classic I learned from my grandmother. Now, you've probably heard of Hungarian goulash. Oh, I'm Hungarian. But what about Mahrapörkölt? Yeah, it's harder to spell than it is to say. I'll tell you, it's the best beef stew you'll ever try. It's looking good. Now, this is some beef shin. It comes from a place called Manning Valley, naturally. If you know the Manning Valley on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, you'd know that it's some of the most beautiful and luscious farmland anywhere. These guys have just about the world's best practice when it comes to sustainability and environmentalism. But we're not just using their incredible beef shin. Being Hungarian, we've got a bit of smoked pork as well, bit of bacon, and yes, that goes through the mincer. Now, what made my grandmother Alice's pork absolutely unique and completely delicious is that she'd thought about texture, and it matters. We actually take some ground and some diced beef. The diced stuff we're going to need to toss in just a little bit of flour, partly to help it caramelise the flavour and partly to thicken the sauce. A generous amount of extra virgin olive oil in there, and the idea simply is to get the beef browned off, and I mean both lots of it. And once it's done, we'll set it aside. But before the beef goes in, I need to make sure that it's nice and hot. And this, by the way, I'll tell you, this is honest truth. I brought this pan from home. If you want to know what I have in my home, it's great. It's great cookware. Now, as you can see, it's not a matter of trying to get it too caramelised or brown, it's just lightly brown. And we'll set that aside. Next up into the pan, we're going to pop some onions, a little bit of green capsicum, and for flavour, it's that wonderful mix. Bay leaf, caraway and garlic. Oh, so Hungarian. It smells absolutely amazing. We should talk quickly about food waste though, because there's a couple of things you should know. For starters, look, I'm using onions and capsicums, but for this you can use any veggies you've got in your crisper, particularly if they need using up. But the other thing you notice is we used a cut called beef shin. Now generally this ends up in mince and sausages. One of the ways we can ensure that we get better use out of the animals we farm is making sure secondary cuts become more valuable, and this is a great way to do it. Now, speaking of valuable, to make it Hungarianly valuable, we will pop our meat into here. But what about the paprika? The one thing you need to know about using paprika in anything, never fry it. Always pop it in once the temperature's cooled down. Otherwise, it becomes bitter. And then for liquids, you're going to use a little bit of beef stock and some fresh tomatoes. Now, it's up to you what kind of tomatoes you want to use, but I love these. I think they're fantastic. It's these little packets of mixed colour ones. Probably need 2 punnets, and then once we bring it up to a simmer, pop the lid on, and it needs to cook really gently for about 3 hours. While the stew cooks, we've got to think about what you'd serve with it. And of course, you've got to get some veggies. My grandmother was very insistent on that, but she was also pretty adventurous. Now, I don't know if you've seen this yet or not, but broccolini, a vegetable that Australians have fallen in love with, now comes in purple. It's a real celebration piece. Look, you can steam it, you can boil it, you can roast it. I still think the best way is to fry it. So in with some extra virgin olive oil from South Australia and finish with walnuts. Over the years, I've had the very great fortune to do a whole bunch of things with OzHarvest. It's an incredible organisation helping to turn leftover foods into something of value for the community. Well, I'm lucky again because I've managed to hook up with Cook to Connect, and if you haven't seen it, you really should look at the whole program. Chefs like myself taking the leftovers in our lives and converting them into beautiful food with the recipes we love best. Well, you know the one thing about them? You will love them just as much as I do.